Hi! Forgive me that I'm going to get tongue-tied, I'm going to mess up, and yeah, so I hope you enjoy this. I asked you guys on Twitter if you wanted a voiceover to this. I actually got some yeses, and some people said that they were interested in, like, learning from me. I'm glad to hear that, but keep in mind I am an amateur. I am not experienced with markers, I'm not experienced with pens, and I also have very shaky hands. So, just be warned. Okay, so as for tips, I would recommend you get your right paper depending on what media you're going to use. Such as if you want to use watercolors, you use watercolor paper. If you want to use markers, you would get like a mixed media paper, or just paper that's thick enough to, be able to handle the markers so it doesn't bleed through. As for pens, I will link down below what pens I use. I have a hard time pronouncing the name. I say it either Sakura or Sakura, and I'm honestly not sure which is the right way. I suggest getting a nice pack that has different sets of nibs. That way you can either use thin lines or thick lines. I do suggest starting out with thin lines so you can later decide what you want to be thick on your paper and what you don't want to be thick. Such as I would normally use thicker lines on her curves to accentuate them. I would also use thicker lines on the vines because I want them to stand out from her. I would use thin lines, however, on her face because her face is relatively small compared to the whole piece, so you want to be really delicate with that area. But the other things that are like bigger, you can kind of have full control over. You'll see eventually that I do go over some pieces with a brush pen, and that's to just enhance the line weights of the piece. I also actually did add in flowers. That was not in my original sketch, but I was like, you know what? I really want to make this like pop with some flowers, so I'm gonna make some flowers on pieces of the vines, but I'm not gonna make too many flowers, just a few here and there. So improvise. Don't be afraid to add in things if you think it'll look good. Art is an experiment, especially if you're making it for yourself. You don't really need to worry about what you're doing. Alright, so here I started using in the markers. I used a Winsor & Newton Almond shade because that is the lightest shade in the skin pack. I laid down my shadows first because when you go over with a marker after it's dried, it'll actually get darker, which should be obvious, but in case you didn't know, now you know. You also want to work fast when you are filling in the piece because of the same issue as I stated before. If you go over a dried marker, or the dried pigment of the marker that left behind, it'll just get darker. So you really want to find out where your shadows are first and color those in so you can later on color in the rest of the piece. So I really took care of her legs because those are kind of hidden by her dress. At least the right leg really is. I took care of her shoulders, the underneath of her arms, her hands, and I also took care of her face a little. I didn't want to do too strong of shadows on her face because her face is already small enough and I was just afraid it would bleed too much. And this is another thing to keep in mind. On watercolor paper, markers do bleed very easily. And I feel like that's because it was meant for watercolor and watercolor is meant to bleed. So beware, let your markers dry first before you use a completely different color on your piece, especially if it's going to clash with the previous color. A lot of people do suggest working in a circular motion too, so if you want to do that you can. I do up and down because I'm too afraid that I apply different pressures if I do a circular motion. So that's more whatever you feel is better for you. And here I'm just trying to enhance her shadows again because her right leg is really meant to be more hidden than her left leg. So I really want to show that off by making the shadows stronger on that area than the other areas. Alright, so I started coloring in the vines, and when I first started coloring in it, I actually used the wrong color. I used a very vibrant dark green, and I meant to use a more muddy green, which you'll see here that I used to cover over. But because of this, I wanted to keep it cohesive, so I started to continuously use that green. And when you do this, I do suggest working fast because you want to be able to blend it in. You don't want it to dry too fast and it looks patchy, I guess I could say. I just wanted to keep it cohesive, but you know, I made a happy little accident.
We have happy accidents.
Because I actually think the vibrant green really helped make the vines look dimensional, and I think it really helped them stand out from from hell. And hell is very dull, so I really wanted the vines to be vibrant. I just thought it would be a cool contrast between them. Oh, also these markers are Ohuhu markers. They are great, very affordable, especially if you're going to get a large pack. At least compared to like Prisma markers, they are super affordable, and I feel like they're very high quality, and if not, possibly even better. I also suggest getting, like, I think I said this before, I suggest getting a brush tip. Ohuhu does have a chisel tip and a brush tip, which is what I have. I'll link what I got in the description. But brush tips are just amazing. I can't imagine using markers without a brush tip. I feel like I have so much more control over my piece. So here I improvised. I wanted to do the same similar blood thing that I was doing in another piece I made, but I actually messed it up, so I tried to do it here. And I went over with another marker because at this point I had actually lost my almond marker, so I started to use a dusky pink marker, which is also by Winsor & Newton, and I think it really helped to enhance the shadows. Even now I'm actually thinking about going over her leg a little more, but I don't want to mess up the piece because I think it looks good so far, so I just left it as it is, and I started to go onto her dress. Her dress is black, so I don't have much advice for this besides that make sure you make a border in between the colors before you just start. Thank you, phone. Before you just start diving in to the actual coloring. And this is because I said before that it bleeds, especially in watercolor paper. And the darker ink will obviously overpower the lighter ink, and you don't want that. So just make a nice strong border, and after you've made this border, go ahead and color in. Like I said, it's black, just you don't really need to color fast. It is the darkest color. So just go about it however you would. Just make sure you make borders. That's all I'm saying. To enhance her curves over there, I just used a jelly roll, which I'll link below, obviously, because I love using jelly rolls. Okay, so for her hair, a lot of people asked me about how I got her hair done. For her hair, I used two different grays. I used a neutral gray, which is the color I'm using right now, and then I used a cool gray. When I did her hair, the first thought process I had was I want to leave wherever like the sun would be hitting her hair, that's where I'll leave white. If you don't know where the sun would be hitting, think of a surface, a rounded surface. The roundest and biggest part of the surface will get the most light. So any time where her hair curved outwards, that's where I would leave white. And then I would go in and do the borders of the white area. I would do it in a cool gray to kind of make like a gradient effect. I think it looks really cool, and it kind of reminds me of like anime mixed with like DC comic book hair coloring and highlighting, so I thought it worked really great. For the ground, I wanted her to actually be in snow, and I wasn't sure how to go about this. Originally, I was actually going to do watercolor for this part, but I don't have watercolor brushes. So I went ahead and I used like a light green gray for the for her cloak and the ground areas that are near the roots and whatnot. And then I just used a light cool gray to really help that. Like blend out and make it look more translucent or snowy, whatever word you want to use. And I just started adding more blood to the piece because I wanted it to have more. And here I'm coloring in her eyes because I forgot to do that beforehand. I went very delicate because it's very small. Alright, you might be confused here, but I'm actually applying washi tape, which, by the way, make sure your piece is 100% dry. Also do like test strands if you want to make sure the washi tape does not lift up any color or inks that you have put onto your paper. And yes, I know this part is scary, but I actually couldn't cut it for some reason. So I'm laying down the washi tape because I actually want to make the black borders. If you saw my my piece on Twitter, then you know what I'm talking about. And I wanted to make it look smoky, but I wasn't sure how to do that. Some of you might know what I'm talking about. It was actually really hard to achieve that, and I couldn't achieve it. So I just basically made like thick, jagged black borders on my piece. And I just did this for the next like 3-ish minutes until I was happy with the way it looked. So I started to lift it up, and the colors did not come off, which is what I was happy about because I was worried that the longer it stood there, the higher chance of the colors coming off. I never used washi tape before, so I wasn't sure what to expect. But I was happy that, you know, it obviously didn't bleed through, and it left my piece looking interesting, but I wasn't happy with it, so I just went in with the brush tip and I started just making random black lines or just filling in dark areas to really enhance the piece, because I really wanted it to look dark around her, but I didn't want to make the whole canvas dark. So I was just like, I'm just gonna do this. I'm just going to give like a black silhouette around, you know, her and her blood particles, I guess. Alright, so here's the finished piece. I hope you guys liked listening to this, and I'm sorry if I sound weird. I've been talking for 16 minutes and I haven't had anything to drink. But thank you guys for watching. If you actually like this video and you want more videos like this, let me know. Thank you.